Hi folks, I've got a bit of a different report for you today, a bit of a breakaway from the whole mysterious virus that we're all so imperiled by. But kind of it's related as well because, with all the stuff that's coming down from the government and all the stuff they're doing to us, trying to help us and trying to protect us and all the stuff that they try to sell to us, you've got to really understand the mind of these people. So what I want to talk about today is an old cold case from Australia. The case that's quite dear to my heart because I actually knew the people involved. And what I'm referring to is the Beaumont children. This is a very, very famous case. It's known all across Australia. It's known right around the world, really. I mean, a lot of people have heard of the Beaumont case back in 1960s. I can't think of the date offhand, but in the 1960s on Australia Day, three young friends of mine who lived one block from me disappeared on a Glenelg Beach, never to be heard again. And it's been a remarkable case because, it's something that they've kept alive for so long. And if there's any inkling of where we think these children might be, there's always a big furor and big hubbub created by the media, and we go and dig up this area and they're never found. And yet when you really start looking into the case, you find that there's a very good indication that the police, the South Australian police and the entire Australian government has known exactly what happened to these children and where they are since day one. And what I'm going to do now is bring on a lady called Rachel Vaughan. Rachel has done quite a few interviews recently. She's been on the ITNJ. She's done a recent interview with Saun Attwood. Great to see Saun have her on. Good on you, Saun. But I want to bring her on now to tell her story to the people of Australia because it's a very, very significant story. And I'm just going to let her take the floor, and I'll kind of butt in and maybe ask a few questions here and there to maybe clarify a few points. But I'm just going to let Rachel tell you the story from her perspective of what really happened to the Beaumont children. And this is a woman that would know because her father was heavily involved in this and his friends were heavily involved in this. And I'll just let her tell the story, but it's quite a gruesome story, but it's something that we need to hear. So Rachel, could you tell us what you know about this case and how you'd like to get this? And also, folks, below, I'll tell you right now, and I'll tell you at the end of the show, below where you're watching this video, there is a link to a site where you can go and sign a petition for the Beaumont children to have this site exhumed. And bear in mind what I said before, whenever there's one person who says that they think they may know where these children are, they make a huge hubbub about it. And here, according to Rachel's story, there are 3 corroborating witnesses that know where the children are. And we have a petition, which the last time I looked, it had over 12,000 signatures on it, calling for this site to be excavated and exhumed. So take it away, Rachel. Tell us what you know about this.
Thanks, Max, for having me on. I really appreciate it. So I grew up in Adelaide in South Australia. My father was a telecom wiretapper. That was his job. Basically, he was a very strange man. His name's Alan Maxwell McIntyre. He passed away in 2017 while he was being investigated for the first time after 10 years of lobbying to have investigated. Unfortunately, he passed away, so that ceased. Basically, I was witness to several murders and atrocities perpetrated against children during my childhood. I was born in the 1970s. In 1973, I witnessed atrocities and murders in the 70s and 80s, basically. My 2 older half-siblings, Ruth and Andrew, were witness to atrocities in the 50s and 60s. I'm here today specifically to talk about the Beaumont children. Obviously, being born in 73, I wasn't there on the day, but my sister Ruth and my brother Andrew were. And our father has corroborated their allegation that a man called Anthony Munro brought the 3 dead Beaumont children, Jane, Anna and Grant, in the boot of a car to his home in Edwardstown in South Australia. We lived on Macklin Street. Ruth has been very specific about what happened. Andrew corroborates what she saw. He didn't see the children himself, but he did see a large quantity of blood and sand in Anthony Munro's car. He knows that Anthony Munro came to our house that day. This was 1966, Australia Day. Basically, we've been campaigning to have my father and Anthony Munro investigated for this since 2006. And I actually wrote to Task Force Argos in Queensland about this guy called Denzel Clark in 2006. I wrote multiple letters I actually ended up sending form letters to politicians, so blanket letters, because the South Australian police would not take us seriously. In 2015, my father spoke to an investigative journalist called Brian Litley and actually corroborated Ruth's allegation that Anthony Munro brought the 3 dead Beaumont children to our house in the boot of a car. My father's allegation and my sister's allegation was still ignored. Another witness came forward. I won't name him, he's terrified. He actually witnessed Munro murdering the oldest Beaumont child. He came forward 2 years ago with Brian Litley's assistance. The police still will not act. And as you said before, there have been so many situations where the mildest allegation has been made and then a huge furor and media furor has occurred, and there's been an investigation, and this has been happening over and over and over again. The last one was at the Castor factory in North Plympton, blaming a man called the Satin Man, Harry Phipps. Now that was based on one man's allegations, and I don't doubt that Harry Phipps was involved with the family and was a person of interest. But the allegation made was just one person. Here we have 3 people. My father speaking on camera, saying that Anthony Munro brought the children to our house. My sister physically saw the children in the boot of the car. My brother saw the blood and sand in Anthony Munro's car. There was a diary that was written that put my father and several other persons of interest, including my brother Andrew, who was only about 12 at the time, on Glenelg Beach in the days and weeks leading up to the disappearance of the Beaumont children. My father had a pair of bathers that were described by witnesses on the beach. Munro fits beautifully the allegation of a blonde-haired man speaking to the children. So you've got all of these. We've got cars of interest that were involved and seen and witnessed. So you've got so much evidence. Now, Andrew remembers specifically Munro taking him over to Stansbury, where my father had another property, racing him over to Stansbury one day, about 2 weeks after the children went missing. And Andrew believes that Munro took him to Stansbury that day to show him that the sinkhole at our father's property had been filled in. Now, I don't know, I think my father must have had a share in that property at that stage because it did belong to my grandfather. And then there was the story about sheep following each other into the sinkhole, which is ridiculous because these are, sheep are not that stupid. They don't follow themselves into a situation like that. And none of the sheep were actually missing. So that was the excuse given by my grandfather for why the sinkhole had to be filled in. So we've got all of these different factors. Also, as you've pointed out on your previous video about this case, Glenelg is pretty much directly opposite Stansbury. Yes, it's pretty much a direct line across the Gulf there. On the day that the children were brought to our property at Edwardstown, Max insisted, my father, I always call him Max, I can't call him Dad, insisted that Anthony Munro help get the boat together. They were going out in the boat. So I can't say any more about that because I was not a witness and I don't want to misrepresent what my brother and sister saw. But it seems to me that perhaps the children were popped into the boat and taken off. Like I said, it wouldn't be that difficult.
That'd be a pretty quick way to get them there as well. I just want to interject for a minute. Your table is rocking a little bit. Your camera's jumping
Yes.
a little bit, so maybe you can move your hands off. People watching may think they're getting a little bit of psychosis. Yeah. So
you're getting emphatic. Yeah.
But it is remarkable, because like Anthony Munro fits the description so well. The slim blonde man on the beach, and like you say, you've got 3 corroborating witnesses. The testimony of your brother I found absolutely compelling when he said how Anthony Munro actually took him over there because he was kind of paranoid about what was going on and he wanted a witness to what was actually happening and where the children were for some reason. And also the testimony of the hidden witness who hasn't come forward yet of what was happening with Jane is very, very compelling. But sorry for interrupting. Please continue.
Oh, that's fine. Look, that other witness, he didn't just come forward 2 years ago. At the time that he witnessed these things, he was given an overdose of sleeping pills. Somehow he survived. Apparently he lost his stomach contents, and if he hadn't, he would have died. He was then taken off to, I believe he was taken to hospital and then taken to the women's police. and he made allegations then. Now, my sister Ruth also made allegations not long after this all happened to the women's police about what actually happened to the Beaumont children. So the women's police have known since 66
Yeah,
about what happened. There
since
has
not,
been one big, long cover-up.
yeah, that was absolutely compelling, and that's the interesting part about it, is that they've known for so long, and it shows that there's incredible connections in there.
Yeah.
You know. And some of the things that you witnessed, and some of the things that your siblings witnessed, involving, you know, high-ranking police officers and perhaps state governors and all sorts of stuff. Quite compelling stuff. So yeah, sorry for butting in, but
No,
please.
not at all, Max. Look, it's probably best I do talk about the police connections as well. So
I think it's really important, because, you know, like, people have to understand that right back there in 1966, the day after it happened, it was literally reported to the police the day after it happened that this witness had literally witnessed the murder. And then, you know, they've known for 50 years, and they didn't investigate any of it. And any time this comes up, it's shouted down. Anything that you've tried to present to them, it's all part of this ongoing investigation, which is a non-going investigation, you know. So it shows just how deep this goes. And, you know, Adelaide, unfortunately, you can get people like the guy that they went and exhumed that yard recently, at Phipps or whatever his name was, because there's so many pedophiles in South Australia, so many pedophiles in Adelaide. It's the child capital of the world, so you can basically go pick anybody and you can get some dirt on them and maybe use them to create a new furor about the Beaumont children, to make the public think that you actually care and you're actually doing something when you're not. And the whole thing's been covered up day one.
And friends of police write books about the children and send people off on a wild goose chase. So I won't say names, but it's fairly obvious who's written about it and who's cousins with who. So, you know, it's the SAPOL line, the South Australian Police line, gets fed to the public over and over and over again, and it is inaccurate and it's hiding things. So I won't say too much except to say that there was a man that lived not far from us on Pine Avenue, who was a high-ranking policeman. My father had a very close friend who sexually abused myself and Tracy Louise Bell, and her first name was Tracy. That wasn't told in the media, but one of her friends has come forward to tell me that what my father told me when she was being kept under our house was actually true, and her first name was Tracy. This Chief Inspector of Police has since been convicted of paedophilia for abusing two girls, one of which was 9, same age as myself and Tracy Louise, at the same time that we were being abused. In the early 80s, he was abusing these girls. He's been convicted for their abuse, but my abuse at his hands and Tracy Louise's won't be looked at. I went all the way to the Office of Public Integrity and kept being told each and every time that it was an operational matter, and that they didn't have to explain to me why they weren't going to take my allegations seriously. I mean, I've had psychiatric assessments in the meantime, trying to lend credibility to what I'm saying. That makes no difference. I had a major crime detective tell me in 2012 that he preferred his own assessment of my mental health based on his years as a detective. And the psychiatric assessment I got was expensive, and it was by a very well respected psychiatrist in Adelaide. So, you know, for a major crime detective to ignore a specialist's assessment of my mental health, and I have other assessments too. I was knocked off my bike as a child. I have assessments from then because, you know, basically that was a hit and run, or not a hit and run. The guy that hit me, my father had sorted that out, had organised for him to hit me off my bike when I was 14 because I wouldn't shut up. Then took me off to this guy's place to have me apologise to him afterwards. So my life's been very, very strange. It's very weird behaviour with my father especially.
The interesting thing too is that they say it was an operational matter. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I'm starting to wonder, you know, there are, okay, so some people have said operational matter refers to if you make an allegation against police, you then get put into the operational matter category. So that's, you know, for daring to make a complaint. But I think it relates more to the MK Ultra factor. So like I said, my father was a wiretapper. He used to tell me he was a spy. He's stated in a letter to a major crime detective in 2012 the same detective that was supposed to be investigating my allegations about Tracy Louise Bell, he stated to that officer that he was a whistleblower to federal police, and that's why his eldest daughter had been murdered, and that why he was getting so much harassment. Even my father believed that my eldest sister was murdered, but the coroner has stated it was a suicide. So Claire died after having been paid out for a compensation payment for being assaulted while she was a teacher, and she hadn't been able to work for many years. Now, I had told her, based on what the union had told me, that you mustn't talk about your childhood abuse when you are going for a compensation claim when you've got a work assessment issue, because you'll never be taken seriously. I believe that that's why she waited until the day after she got her compensation claim to ring the Major Crime Department and tell them she wanted to come in and make allegations about what she saw with the Beaumont children, because she was also present. Next day she was dead. Somehow she snapped her own neck. And it just doesn't make sense. I wrote to the coroner, my brother and sister Ruth and Andrew both wrote to the coroner, and our father wrote to the coroner saying that she'd been murdered. She had had her laptop stolen. Her car had been broken into. There was a blue Commodore parked outside her house, and the same blue Commodore was seen in another supposed suicide not long after that. So it seems she knew too much. She knew too much, so she was gotten rid of.
And they're so open about it. They're so blatant about it. Like, this usually the same blue Commodore. Yeah, and the thing is, you know, with your father having these connections as a wiretap and all this sort of stuff, I mean, there's a very good possibility that he worked for ASIO, which shows that he has very, very deep connections, which shows exactly why they don't want any of this information coming out. Because if they actually do acknowledge your allegations and they go and actually dig up this sinkhole and the Beaumont children are found there, it's going to open up a can of worms, which is going to lead all the way back to Canberra. It's going to lead all to the highest levels of the police in South Australia and right back to the federal government, because it will expose the fact that they were told about this back in 1966, the day after it happened. You know, so remarkable stuff, really remarkable stuff. So you can see why they don't want your story coming out. But with all of the stuff that I've looked at, and look, I knew these kids. This is a personal matter for me. You know, we weren't good friends, but I knew them. I used to go to kindergarten. I was one block away from them. When I was a little kid, I went to kindergarten. I went to the same kindergarten as them. And there was a big clearing over the road, which was now a Masonic village. And we all used to meet and play there. All the local kids used to play there, and we all knew each other. So, you know, it's kind of a personal thing for me. And, you know, with all the information that's come out, yours is the most compelling and yours is the most credible. And, you know, we need to get this sinkhole exhumed. We need to get a huge amount of public outcry and get enough people aware of what's going on here. And even with the petition, I mean, petitions don't do anything. It just tells the government how you feel. But the fact that there's over 12,000 people who have signed up on this petition, when
13,500.
if one person says he has an inkling, it should show you, you know, how unwilling they are to really investigate this case, you know?
Yeah. It's so obvious, it's ridiculous. So that the comments on the petition are getting angrier and angrier. People are getting more and more frustrated. And I think with this COVID-19 situation, you've got a lot of people now who are being red-pilled, who are suddenly realising that the conspiracies aren't so much just conspiracy theories. There's a conspiracy going on.
They've red-pilled the whole.
I don't think they realised that we'd have all this extra time on our hands to be thinking about these things.
Yeah, and people aren't really moving into fear. Your brother's testimony is absolutely compelling as well. I looked at some of the stuff he talked about, the journey on the ferry and a few things like this on the front, you know, the murder on the front. And some of the stuff that he was witness to. I mean, what would you like to see come of all this? What's your plan? I mean, what do you think you're ever going to get any joy at all from the South Australian Police?
No, I believe that the South Australian Police, particularly the Major Crime Department, has to be disbanded. We've already seen the Police Complaints Authority disbanded. We've seen the Police Ombudsman's Office has been disbanded, both because of corruption and ineptitude. The Major Crime Department it's so corrupt, it's ridiculous. So I've had interactions with multiple members of that department, and they have been, you know, they'll either laugh at you, or they'll belittle you, or they'll tell you you're crazy. Or, I mean, I was told by one particular detective that the edifices below my father's home where I grew up couldn't possibly exist. He hadn't even been there to check it out. So
That's,
he
that's,
just assumed.
that's the thing as well. You've been talking about tunnels that exist beneath Adelaide, beneath your father's house. There's access to the tunnels beneath your father's house, tunnel systems. And I can verify, folks, that there are tunnel systems in Adelaide all through the place, because I grew up in Adelaide and I used to play in the tunnel systems. I used to find little storm drains. You could actually find places where there was like a storm drain in the gutter. It was wide enough, and if you're a small kid, you could get down there, crawl through the first little drain and get into a major tunnel system, and you could go anywhere in the city through these tunnels. So if there's access to these tunnels through certain houses in certain suburbs, and they use these tunnels to traffic children, it's very, very feasible. This is exactly what's going on, folks. And you actually reported this to the police, didn't you? And they went and investigated, but they didn't look in the area that you told them to look. You also told them where there was a body buried in your yard, but they didn't look in the area you told them to look. They went and investigated and said, oh yeah, we looked and she's wrong, there's nothing there. You want to talk about that a little bit?
So no ground penetrating radar was taken. They supposedly looked in termite inspection points, and that was the extent of the investigation. I told them that they needed to go up and through the manhole and look for a hatch that went behind a pantry that's got a weird void behind it. And even if you look at that house, and I can't give the address specifically, but I've got everything off the real estate website, and the pantry's still there, and the voids around the edges of the pantry still exist. So he used to shimmy down the back of the pantry by going up through. He had a particular ladder that was custom designed for that spot. He'd climb up the ladder in the laundry, go through the manhole, and go down the back of the pantry, and he would get into the underground space.
So that was interesting. You wouldn't be lifting up a trapdoor looking for a tunnel in the floor. You actually go up into the ceiling, crawl across the ceiling, go down behind the pantry to a tunnel system. Very, very sneaky. And
very sneaky.
There. And there's also a body of a child buried in the backyard in that property as well, I believe. Max,
there's two. So the second one, I've never given the actual definite identifiers of where he is, because I daren't, because I knew, you know, if one was tampered with, I saw two buried there. In fact, I was shoved into the second burial spot with the boy's body. In fact, he was dumped on top of me, amid my other family member cackling in the background that he should just empty all the soil onto me, as well as the body of this boy. The other girl, Tracy Louise Bell, I saw buried the day after she was murdered. And then my father and this chief inspector of police poured a slab of concrete there. Now, I told police where to find her in 2012. They then went very quickly into convicting Dita Fennick for that case. Now, a guy called Raymond Giesing had already been convicted and exonerated in 1985 for the same case. They have no body. All they have is DNA on a pajama top that was left out to be found. And my father knew about DNA at that point, and they've convicted Fennick on the DNA on this pajama top. Now, there could have been innocent transfer because his daughter knew Tracy Louise Bell. That burial spot, as much as I tried, and I tried to point it out, and I even told police that her hair was different. It was shorter. It was very different to the photograph that they're always airing of her. That statement's in the petition. I put that statement in a couple of years ago. Shortly after that interview in June of 2012, they then aired footage of her with exactly the haircut. And I said to the officers, her hair was either badly bleached or sun-bleached. Well, in the footage, you can see her hair is sun-bleached. So, and she's a lot older in the footage than the photograph they always air of her. I've gone through the Hackham Primary School school photos on the Facebook site, and you can see the photograph they air of her, that's the most common photograph that they share, is of her at least 3 or 4 years younger than when she went missing. So they're showing a child of about 6 in the photograph that they air, whereas she was 10. So it seems to me they weren't trying to find her. They gave out her wrong name. They gave out her middle name, not her first name. So they gave her a name as Louise Bell. Her name is Tracy Louise Bell, according to her friend and according to my father. I don't have a birth certificate, so I can't prove that. I'm hoping perhaps anybody who sees this who also knew her to please contact me, because I need, what I'm looking for is a yearbook or something. Apparently Hackham Primary doesn't have the yearbooks, but someone might have an old school photo with her name underneath as Tracy Louise Bell, and that would be enormously helpful to my cause to prove this. And I've got a relentless stalker troll who's been harassing me since I made that statement. And again, I didn't know it was true. I just knew that my father had told me that. I wasn't allowed to speak with her. But I got that, and when I told a major crime detective about that in 2012, he nearly fell off his chair. So I said, her first name was Tracy, and he went, what? And he nearly fell off his chair. So I know I wanted something.
Tracy Louise Bell, she was kept in the basement beneath your house for a while.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Quite a while, Max. It's quite a while.
And she was 10 years.
Sorry?
She was 10 years old, and she was kept in the basement for like several months, a few months down there. So
she went missing in January. I estimate it was around about June or July. No, it was June. Sorry, it would have been late May, early June when I found. So because of the edifice under the house, one corner of the house was crumbling away, and there was a big hole underneath it. And so I came from school or somewhere one day, and there's my father shimmying out of the hole underneath the house. He then insisted that I go in the hole, shoved me through it head first. And when I was in there, I stood up to discover this girl wrapped up in what appeared to be the Hessian sort of stuff you have under carpet underlay. No clothing on. Well, she didn't have a top on. She was the underlay came up to about here. She had a gag on. She was dirty. Yeah. So it was from then until I think she was murdered on my 10th birthday, which is the 16th of September, 1983. I believe it's around either on that day or around that day, because my father kept telling me that as a 10-year-old, I was 9 when she went missing, as a 10-year-old, I was complicit. And he actually put the weapon in my hand and made me, with his hands around my hand, made me deal the death blow. So he was trying to make me feel guilty and feel complicit, and kept telling me that I would go to jail for that. So this is why I've been carrying this for so long, and so important to me to have this girl's burial place properly exhumed, but it's all been destroyed now.
I can't imagine like keeping a 10-year-old girl underground in a cellar and just must have been feeding her enough to keep her alive, and just keeping her in the dark and going and abusing her. I mean, these are life-changing stories, and really, really compelling stories. And when you realise the level of complicity that the police have got in all this by failing to investigate this and failing to take any of this seriously. And like I've said, Adelaide, Australia is the child murder capital of the world. And with this information, if there's any decent police officer, then surely there's got to be someone decent somewhere in the South Australian Police Force. I mean, can't you look at this information? And if there's people, you go up the food chain and you get blocked, well, no, you need to arrest that person who's blocking you, because that person's complicit. I mean, what's wrong with people? What's wrong with the morals of people? They can have information like this come to them, such a compelling case that could be used to expose this entire pedophile ring that's running this country. Yeah. And they won't do anything about it. Surely there's got to be someone in the police force who actually joined the force because they wanted to do the right thing and aren't afraid to actually have a backbone and stand up to all this. I mean, that's what I'd like to see come from this, because I mean, you've gone out there and you've done all these interviews and you've been telling these people, you've been pushing them for years and years and years, and it's got to the point that now you've literally got to come to people like me on YouTube and try to get it out that way. I mean, it's ridiculous that we have to go to these lengths to try to get the truth out to people. And the media in this country, I mean, the media all around the world, I was saying on a walk that I did today that the media is the most powerful entity on earth, and their failure to report this stuff, I mean, they could blow this whole case wide open if there was someone in the media that would even talk about this as well. It's just great.
And they can't hide the edifices under that property. So this is the thing, the evidence is all there. There was a kiln, a large kiln underneath the main shed. I've been able to prove that it was an old Wunderlich terracotta, either tile or brick kiln. My father said it was a brick kiln. He didn't just show that to me. He also told another sibling about it, called it a brick kiln. The reason it's underground is because there was a large clay deposit when the place was called Beaumont. There was another place in New South Wales also called Vermont, which Wunderlich was already digging all the clay out of. So they named the area after the clay deposit. Once the clay deposit was removed, of course, the kilns were built at that lower level, and then fill was brought in to cover the suburb up once all the clay had been removed, and to return it back to ground level. So there are quite a few kilns in that area. It was 160 strong workforce, and that was a major operation. This is just near South Road. So the Wunderlich factory was on the corner of South Road and Cross Road, and our Macklin Street's just a couple of streets back from there. So I've even been able to show in street maps that Macklin Street was impassable in 1938, and I believe that's during the government mandate to build tunnels, trenches or bunkers around or within 20 feet of the back door of all homes, businesses and meeting places. So I've done so much research to prove that what I described to the doctors, major crime officers in 2012 was correct.
What was the purpose of building all these kilns and these bunkers?
They were creating or burning the clay into terracotta tiles, which cover the roofs of a lot of places in Adelaide. But later, they were converted to bunkers for the pre-Second World War, because they believed that the Tokyo rose, Japan was going to attack from the Kangaroo Island end and come straight up South Road. So that whole area was really important to have really strong sort of underground sort of places for people to hide. And when you've got 160 strong workforce at Wunderlich, they needed somewhere, a bunker, and they needed tunnels. And the tunnels had to take the workforce from the corner of Cross Road and South Road to the old kilns that possibly weren't being used at that point.
So isn't it remarkable that all that is recorded in the actual history of the area, and yet you can tell the authorities about tunnels that exist beneath Adelaide, and they'll say, oh no, that's all fiction, there's no tunnels beneath Adelaide. Well, what's all that? And actually, I remember going to a couple of places when I was a kid that had air raid shelters, and they say, oh, it's an air raid shelter, it's a bunker. And I'm like, wow, what are you doing with a bunker? I mean, Adelaide, why is there a bunker here? I found it quite fascinating. Interesting stuff, Darren, really interesting stuff. But, you know, there's got to be someone that's going to act on this. And you were saying earlier, you said that when you're in the hole and he threw the body in on top of you, one of your siblings was laughing and saying that he should throw the dirt.
No, another family member. And I can't name that person because they're quite powerful. I got close to it recently. That person also needs to go to jail.
I wanted to ask you if you wanted to name that person, but that's understandable. The thing is, over with the sinkhole, I mean, where the property is on Stansbury, where the sinkhole is, where you're alleging the Beaumont children are, and your brother's corroborating that, and you know, there's every indication that's where they are. This property is still owned by your family, isn't it?
Yes, it is, by my full brother and sister.
What's their story? I mean, wouldn't they want to have this cleared up and just have the place? And do they actually own the property, or is it on Crown land next to the property?
It's on Crown land, but we can't get access because of the threats. So, and invariably we'll get one of the owners saying, oh yes, you can go on there, but we won't do it unless SAPOL does the dig. And SAPOL aren't interested. So that's their number one argument, that SAPOL aren't interested, so we must be crazy, and you know, police are, you know, gods and they must know everything and they are always right. Okay, so that's one argument. The second argument is it's usually from just one of the owners, because the other one seems pretty mute on this, is that our father was supposedly suffering from dementia at the time that he alleged that Anthony Munro brought the dead Beaumont children to our house in Edwardstown. Now, that was in 2015 that he made that allegation. This same sibling, when my brother Andrew and I contested the will, because we're still trying to get access to the property at that point, offered a will that she had him sign about 6 or 7 weeks after he gave those allegations in that interview. And this will obviously favoured her. So her argument is completely defunct. Otherwise she's committed fraud. And I didn't want to bring that up, but I did recently, because it's got to the point where her friends and these supporters that she has, or I don't know if they're actually, if they're blackmailing her or what's going on, But they've got to the point now where they're impersonating me. They're not just trolling me and my other two siblings. They're impersonating me. So, I mean, we've got a barrister onto that, so we're hoping to have that sorted out pretty quickly. But I had to fight. I had to fight back. So, you know, to that sister, I'd like to say, you brought this on yourself. I had to do it. I had to show the fraud. And it's not just that will that's fraudulent. There's other frauds that have taken place, which will put her in a very bad light, and the other person who owns the property, as well as declarations that have been made in legal papers that she and the other family member allowed their children to have access, or my father to have access to their children after we made the allegations about him. And these are small children, Max.
Well, the thing is,
so
you know,
they're trying to save face.
well, they can't allege that he was suffering dementia when he made the claims, and yet that a will that he made 5 or 6 months later wasn't made under someone suffering dementia. I mean, it doesn't make sense at all, that claim.
No.
But you know, if it's on Crown land, I mean, I'd like to see a whole bunch of people just show up there and exhume the sinkhole. I'd like to see a couple of thousand people just show up there with shovels, you know, maybe some excavating equipment.
It's been spoken about. A lot of people have been offering.
And it's,
but we've got all the equipment paid for, everything.
If the police were going to do something to say like, well, you can't do that, you're contaminating a crime scene. Well, how do you know it's a crime scene if you won't investigate it? I mean, all of this sort of stuff. You're claiming they're not there, so how is it a crime scene? You know, I'd like to see the public just sort of take this, realise that the system is corrupt. They're not going to do the right thing. You know, and these, like I said at the start, these people that are covering all this up, these are the same people that are involved with the crew in Canberra, running all of this COVID stuff and all this pandemic and all the stuff that they're doing, the whole lockdown that we're having, you know, the quarantine that we're under, which isn't quarantine. I mean, if people are ill, they're in quarantine. Innocent people that are doing this is called house arrest. So, you know, these are the same people that are covering up this whole case. So, I mean, if we could get enough people involved in this to actually want to go there and simply just demand that, no, we're going to exhume this sinkhole. We'd like the police to be involved, but if you're not going to be involved, then we're going to do it on our own because this is an important case that needs to be done. I mean, if we could do that and we could find the bodies of these children, it would blow this entire government system completely out of the water, you know, and it would be a great thing if we could find a way to do this. You know, we don't want to push anyone, we don't want to be violent about it, but we're digging in this hole. You know?
Yeah. I thoroughly agree with you, Max. It's the only way it's ever going to get sorted.
Well, that's the attitude that people need to have, and that's really what needs to be done because, you know, there needs to be a huge public outcry against SAPOL. You know, if you're going to go and dig up a driveway because one person makes a little claim, well, here you got 12,500 people. And again, folks, petition is below. Please go and sign this petition to have this sinkhole exhumed. And, you know, like I said, petitions don't mean anything, but it just shows how many people and how many numbers there are saying, hey, this is not right. You know, if they can go and dig up a driveway because one person makes a claim, well, what about, you know, nearly 13,000 people who are asking to do so? So it's pretty significant. It's pretty significant. So that's what I'd like to see happen. You reckon there's any chance of that? I mean, what would they do?
I think there's a very high chance, Max. I think there's a very high chance. And I know my sibling who saw the children, Ruth, doesn't want that to happen because she's terrified that the evidence will be contaminated. But while we're waiting for things to be done by, you know, police, who knows who's going to be tampering with the spot? You know, anything could happen. My brother was not Andrew, the other one, burnt a lot of stuff on the night that my father died. So, and we've actually had more than one witness come forward and say that it didn't smell like timber. He was interviewed the next day and said it was just timber, mate. Didn't smell like timber. It smelled like burning hair and flesh. So my father was a very strange man. I believe he kept treasures of his victims, not just bones, but other bits and pieces. So I'm sorry that's so graphic, but this is the sort of person that he was. He also left a will prior to the 2015 will. He left a 2010 will, leaving all of his important papers of research to my cousin, ex-leader of the Liberal Party, Martin Hamilton Smith. Now, we don't know what those papers are. I'd like to know what those papers are, Martin. Can you please share them with us? Because I think that they might help us a great deal. So if Martin's watching, I would really appreciate a copy.
That's that's an interesting person to be leaving stuff to in your will, isn't it?
Very interesting.
This telecom worker that people are saying, oh no, he had no ties to anything. No, he was very, very well connected. You know,
He
but
was
even
running a honeypot operation.
even if we did get a lot of people there and go and dig up the hole, I mean, I'm not saying there'd be thousands of people there with shovels just ripping at it. You'd have to do it properly. But if you had a whole bunch of people there just securing the area and saying, hey, we're doing this, and then we're going to go and we're going to do it carefully, we're going to do it properly, but we're doing it. I mean, that's what needs to happen. You know, people have got to really grow a little backbone and realize that we're in dire straits in this country. The people that are running the place are not honest. And crimes like this, you know, if they're going to do this with the Beaumont children, I mean, how many other crimes are they going to cover up, and how deep does it go? And the fact that this case, because of its significance and the fact that they were told about it, the police were told about it over 50 years ago, it is such a can of worms that it would expose so much corruption in this country. If we can, all we have to do is find the bodies in that place. If there's the bodies of 3 children in that sinkhole, and they match the descriptions of the Beaumonts, then you know this is the hugest can of worms that would lead to such a groundswell of knowledge in this country, and such an exposing of the government system in this country. I think it's extremely important that a lot of people find out about this and make noise about it. You know, share this information. Go and sign the petition.
Yes, please do. Please sign the petition. It might not necessarily make it happen, but it shows, it's a record of the frustration. And we are all taxpayers, and we are employing these people, and they need to do what's asked of them. There was no petition for the Castelloy dig when there was one allegation against that Phipps man. It's just ridiculous that we have to go to these levels and these lengths. I've actually, you know, I work, I've got a life, I'm putting myself in immense danger, and I just have to keep doing it because I can't go quiet now, because then I'll just get bumped off. So I'm going to have to keep up this level of public persona in order to get this sorted out, I believe. So that's why I keep doing this. You know, that's my impetus, is to stay alive.
Well, yeah, you got to get your face out there, darling. You got to get your face out there and get enough people aware of this. And I completely support what you're doing. And I've been sharing your stuff with everybody, telling them they need to go and look at it. What else do you want to say about this? What else do you think is significant? I mean, your father was a pretty nasty person. The thing is, you've done a bunch of interviews about this already. You've talked about the fact that he was a cannibal, and I mean, pretty intense stuff. And for anybody who's watching this, I'll link to the Saun Attwood interview below, and I'll also link to the ITNJ interview that you did if you want more on this. But is there anything that you didn't say on those interviews that you'd like to share now? Anything, you know, what are your deepest thoughts on all this?
Look, my father wasn't just doing those things. He was also running a honeypot operation to blackmail people. And so that all sort of ties in with the ASIO activity. He was supposedly a Navy Reserveman, but I can't get any information from the National Archives about his Navy Reserve activities, which is very interesting. He apparently doesn't have any records. The kiln underneath our property was also used as a telecommunications bunker, and given he was a telecom worker and the person who owned the property before him was also a telecom worker, is a sign, I believe, that telecommunications bunker was very important. Telecommunications bunkers, there's another one at 862 South Road not far away. They all had to have interconnecting tunnels for people to run memos backwards and forwards, or to run wires. So there is so much evidence that this is what I've said it is. There might be all sorts of things hidden in that kiln. It's a large edifice. Now, apparently the shed on top is falling apart and it's collapsing. So, you know, the owners of that property.
This is your place in Edwardstown, yeah? The old place in Edwardstown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct. So that's important as well, the fact that he was running this honeypot operation, because it gave him immunity from prosecution, not just the fact that, and he was also getting rid of state boards that were considered or he called them undermention, you know, that they didn't have people to care for them, so they were just a bane on society. So he was getting rid of children, and I spoke about that in the Saun Attwood interview as well, because I wanted to connect with his English audience because of the UK stolen generation sent here. So, you know, some of those children with English accents were used with my brother Andrew in child porn as well. My father had all of that equipment because of his connections to Channel 9. So this is a very convoluted and complicated case, and this is why South Australian Police will not look in and won't investigate. But we do need people to sign the petition. We do need to create awareness. So if people could share this video and just, you know, do as much as they can to get the message out there.
Because Channel 9 was involved as well. You were involved in child porn in Channel 9 studios in Adelaide as well, weren't you?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
This is like people's sacred ground in so many people who sit there and they worship the television and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, while the newsreaders are doing that in the other room, there's all this other stuff going on. You know, I mean, people have got to understand how deep this goes, and you should be able to realise how fake the news is and how contrived it all is anyway. I mean, what are you seeing on the news these days? COVID, 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 COVID. Nothing seems to be happening in the world, folks. No murders.
No.
Gun sales in the United States are through the roof. No shootings. What's going on there, you know?
Yeah.
COVID, you see how manufactured all the news actually is to lead us to this point, you know, but they're all so heavily involved. And your case shows how heavily involved they are. And when you say they were getting rid of state wards and it was a honeypot thing, like are you saying your father was literally bringing in state ward children and there were police or other people coming in and these children were actually being raped and killed or whatever, and he's getting it on film and this sort of stuff?
Yeah, he was involved with snuff films.
Oh,
So,
well.
yeah, so it's every nuance you can possibly imagine with the satanic ritual abuse thrown in on top. So it is an ugly can of worms, like you said. It's hideous. He was a Luciferian, a Rosicrucian. He was a follower of the Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley. Their belief system was purely to do, if it feels good, do it. That was his belief system, and that's what he did. And he got an enormous amount of power and money and influence.
There was a
ritual
you attended when you were a child as well. I heard you talk about in another interview. It was an outdoor ritual. There were like 30 or 50 people there or something. There were a bunch of kids that involved the cooking and eating of a small child. And there was a young redheaded woman there. Do you know who that young redheaded woman was?
No, but I've been trying to work it out for a while. She was quite attractive. I've spoken to Fiona Barnett about it because she pointed the finger at somebody at one point that I thought could have been this person, but apparently the age difference wasn't quite right. This woman was quite pretty. I'd say blue or green eyes, red hair, she had red lipstick, and she seemed most distressed that the baby was put on the bonfire. She ran off and two people ran off after her. A man and a woman ran off after her. And, you know, my detractors have said, oh, well, nobody else has come forward to talk about this. Well, it was so traumatizing. It took me years to remember that. I remembered other abuses before that one came up because that was probably the most horrific of all of the murders that I witnessed. The people who were witness to it were the family. They were the group. So they're not going to come forward and explain it. And the children who were sitting down next to me at a distance of probably 1 to 2 meters apart, there was 8 or 10 of us there. One was vomiting profusely at the end of the line. Absolutely, poor kid was vomiting his guts up. Some of those children probably do remember, but this is horrific. And they've not come forward. I hope and pray they will. I really do. But we're talking some very powerful people were present there that day. And one ended up being an Attorney General of South Australia. So when you've got people that powerful, they're protected. And the other members there, well, they're not going to be saying, oh, hey, I was there too, if they're complicit in it or complicit in this sort of thing happening on a regular basis, which it may well have been.
And when you see the depths of that, you know, that someone that was there ended up being the Attorney General. You know, as I've often said on the show, you know, they've got dirt on people. Otherwise, you don't get the big chair. You know, if they haven't got dirt on you, you don't get the big chair. And sometimes, you know, they get people involved with child sex or whatever. But when it goes to the level that you're describing, I mean, this is a lot of dirt to get on people. You're never going to have any of the people that were at that meeting come forward. You know, if they haven't come forward now, unless it's some of the children that can have that plausible deniability, you're never going to have any of these people come forward. But it goes so deep. Do you want to talk a little bit about another red-headed lady, or do you not want to touch on that topic for the moment? A famous red-headed lady in this country?
Oh, don't know much about her, but all I know is that she has some connections to the Clinton Foundation, which is of great disturb.
Well, if you don't have any personal knowledge, we won't mention her name or bring her into the conversation. We'll spare her that. But is there anything else you want to talk about? Anything else you want to say? What would you like to say to everyone, Rachel?
No, I've probably said everything I need to say. Thanks, Max. And thank you so much for being so thoughtful.
Well, it's
and
been
spending the time.
And I really want to stay in contact, and we'll just catch up and chat. And if there's anything you want to say, if there's any information that comes to hand, or any information you want to get out to people, I'm happy to just have you on and we'll just do a 5 or 10 minute chat or a 15-minute chat or whatever. If you've got like a news flash or anything like that, or if you're in any trouble or anything, or you just need attention, just let me know, okay? And I really want to support you in what you're doing and help get your face out to people. It was great, even from just having that little mention on my show when I mentioned it. It was great to see how the petition jumped. So hopefully we're going to see that again with this show. Hopefully we'll see a major jump in the numbers on this petition.
It was about 2,000 signatures. 2,000. Thank you, Max.
It's great. We want to get that right up there. We want to get up to like 20 grand, 100 grand. We want to get a lot of signatures because this is so important. But thank you, Vaughan, for coming on. I hope it didn't butt in too much. But do contact me if you've got anything at all that you want to share. And I will put the links that are very, very in-depth interviews. But I mean, there's no good repeating it, because if people come and listen to the same interview, they say, oh, she's saying the same thing over and over again. So it's kind of good to mix it up. And like to kind of have the real you on here, just us having a conversation. So, but I will put the links to those interviews below, folks. Please go and look at them, share them with everybody. Sean Attwood, I believe, did a fantastic job. I haven't watched the interview, but I've read the comments, and they're all absolutely praising the job that Sean did. And he's really good at stuff like that. I mean, he focuses on all this true crime stuff. So do share the information. Do support Rachel. Have you got any way people can support you? Have you got like a PayPal or a Patreon, or you got any fundraisers or anything? I mean,
no. Look, I'm not asking for money. Basically,
you just want this information out there.
Yeah, basically, yeah. That's all I'm really after. Yeah.
If you see any trolls chasing this woman around, folks, jump in and go to bat for her, because she needs your support, you know. And we all should support people that are willing to come out and put themselves on the line the way Rachel's doing. Thank you, darling, and we'll catch up soon. Hey, stay safe.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, folks. I'm going to bring you some more reports of what's going on in Australia soon as well. I actually want to do one about the Port Arthur massacre. I'm going to label this one Australia's Dark Secrets, and this will be part 1, the Beaumont children and Rachel Vaughan. So we'll see how many dark secrets we can uncover of what's going on in this country. Thanks for joining us, folks. Talk soon. Thank you, Rachel.